So if that limiting belief believes that it's there to serve you and keep you safe, and you've not yet developed another belief that gives you as much safety, as much security as that limiting belief is giving you, okay? To say, well, if there's something wrong with me, then I need to figure out how to change myself so I'll stay safe. If your system doesn't have another alternative belief to go to, it's not going to let go of that other belief. And that's why limiting beliefs are so sticky, because we're trying to push away one when we don't have something else to replace it with or to hold on to. We have to develop new positive core beliefs that our system can begin to trust and go to, and that limiting belief will begin to fall away in the background because it's no longer needed to serve you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Permission to Love podcast, a podcast where we're learning how to have a healthier relationship with ourselves by transforming our trauma, moving from shame to self-love. And so I'm so grateful that you're here today. I'm your host, Jerry Henderson. Now, today we're going to be talking about limiting beliefs. What are they? How do they get formed? And how do we begin to change them? How do we give ourselves empowering beliefs instead of feeling like we're constantly limiting our lives by a set of negative beliefs? So let's start by talking about what limiting beliefs are. Now, limiting belief is more than just a thought pattern. When people think about limiting beliefs, they think about it simply as the way that they think. Now, while thoughts are an important part of our limiting beliefs and how they get developed, limiting beliefs are not just thoughts alone. They go a lot deeper than that. They are our core belief systems about ourselves in a negative way, okay, in a limiting way. Now, we all have core beliefs. Those core beliefs can either serve us and help us in life, or we can have core beliefs that are negative or are limiting. And those limiting beliefs usually get formed around three areas. We get limiting beliefs about people, about life, and most importantly, ourselves. And you've heard me talk about that before. And in today's episode, I really want to dig into some of the mechanics behind how all of this works. So why are limiting beliefs more than just a thought? Well, limiting beliefs actually get stored in our system. They get stored in our subconscious, they get stored in our bodies, and those beliefs begin to drive almost everything that's in our life. They work in the background as a set of programming that really is directing our decisions and our choices, and that can be happening at a subconscious level, and it also can be happening at a conscious level. Now, in comparison to a thought, you can have a thought, realize that the thought isn't true, dismiss it, and move on. A limiting belief can sit below our awareness, and it can be driving things in our life and pushing us in directions that are undesirable for us. So what are some of the limiting beliefs that people struggle with? Well, people struggle with imposter syndrome. They struggle with the belief that they're not enough, that there's something wrong with them. They struggle with the belief of not being worthy. They may struggle with the belief that in order to have relationships, I have to abandon myself. They may struggle with a limiting belief that life is unfair, that life always shows up to me in a negative way. You might struggle with a limiting belief that other people are untrustworthy, and that becomes a belief system that's wired in you. Now, we're going to talk about how some of that serves us later on in the episode and why that gets wired into us. But those are just some examples of limiting beliefs, and those limiting beliefs really do begin to limit us. For example, if we think in a relationship we have to abandon ourselves in order to be loved, that's going to show up when we start choosing very unhealthy and very toxic relationships in our lives. And we wonder why we keep choosing those types of relationships. Well, there's a limiting belief in the background that's driving those choices, right? And you have those moments where you find yourself in another one of those relationships and you're like, well, how did I get into this again? Well, the reality is that limiting belief was operating back there, and it was aligning you with the energy that you're familiar with and the energy that was going to confirm that belief about yourself. See, when we have a limiting belief, we get into what is called confirmation bias. We've talked about that before. And what that does is I actually start looking for things and I start gravitating towards things that are going to confirm my bias or confirm my limiting belief about myself. So if I don't believe that I deserve healthy, good relationships, that limiting belief is going to operate in the background. And guess what's going to happen? I'm going to find myself in unhealthy relationships. And I'm going to be so frustrated because I keep repeating the pattern and I don't know why I'm repeating the pattern. Well, we're repeating the pattern because of a limiting belief And the good news is the limiting belief can be healed, it can be transformed, and we're going to talk about that today. So how do limiting beliefs get formed? Okay, I'm going to take you through this cycle, and then we're going to break it down a little bit. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about how we can reprogram those limiting beliefs and how we can actually change them. So the first thing that happens in the formation of a limiting belief is we have an experience. Something happened. As a child, that could have been trauma, abuse. You could have later in life gotten into a toxic relationship with a narcissist or just a really painful relationship in your life. Or you could have had other painful life experiences that happened to you. So you have this experience, whatever it is. And when you have that experience, you're assigning meaning to that experience. Your brain, your body, your system is trying to formulate some meaning about what just happened. Now, when it's trauma, when it's abuse, every part of our system is getting activated, right? Our bodies, our emotions, the nervous system, our minds. I mean, it's all happening in that moment. And a lot of times we're not conscious about the meaning that we're making from that event. You see, one of the most powerful things that we have as humans is the ability to make meaning of things, that we can assign meaning. Now, that ability to assign meaning can either serve us or it can really hurt us, depending on the meaning that we assign. So when we have those events, when we have those experiences, our bodies, our brains, they go to work. They go to work trying to assign a meaning. And much of that is just around survival. I need to assign meaning to this experience so that when I experience it again in the future, I know what this means. I know that it's either dangerous or it's not dangerous. It's safe or it's unsafe. And so your brain is trying to calculate that and categorize this experience. And from the meaning that we assign to those experiences, we then start to make decisions. We can make decisions about people, life, and ourselves. And one of the decisions you might have made about yourself is that there's something wrong with you, right? That because that happened to me, there must be something bad about me that a person would have done that to me. And so therefore, I have made a decision about myself that there's something wrong with me. And from that decision, it becomes a thinking pattern. We begin to think those thoughts towards ourselves. And we begin to say things to ourselves like, what's wrong with me that I do that? Or what's wrong with me that, I can't get that promotion at work, or I got passed over? What's wrong with me that I can't choose a healthy relationship? And so that begins to drive the way that we think, which then begins to drive our emotions, the way that we feel. And then that really gets cemented at that point as a core belief that is limiting for us. So it's a limiting core belief that got wired from that entire cycle, okay? And it's important to understand that cycle. Experience, meaning, decision, which that decision then leads to a development of a core belief through our thinking patterns, through our emotions, and all of that getting wired into us, and it really starts to get embedded. And we can actually get addicted to a core belief. You can get addicted to a negative core belief, and you want to continue to replay that out in your life because your body is used to you feeling bad about yourself, having negative thoughts about yourself, and feeling that negative energy in your body. And so when something good happens to you, what do? You find a way to reinforce the negative belief, the thing that you believe about yourself, by self-sabotaging, choosing another bad relationship, letting the thoughts come in your mind about your past failures. You'll begin to interpret what people say as negative instead of positive. You'll really begin to dwell on a comment that was made. And all of that is working to reinforce a limiting belief that got wired in you. Okay? And then those core beliefs begin to play out in our actions around some of the things that I've just talked about, right? Choosing toxic relationships, self-sabotaging, etc. So then those actions, okay, that are coming from our core beliefs then begin to produce results. And those results, when we see them, our brain interprets them as confirming our belief system. Okay? Because I believe this about myself, I take these actions that are self-sabotaging actions, and then the results are painful or negative and not what I want, which, once again, must be confirming the fact that what I believe about myself is true. There's something wrong with me. I'm not talented enough. People don't like me. My authentic self is not enough, etc., etc. So then what that result actually is it's a new experience that then starts the whole loop again, right? So we now had another experience. We assigned meaning to it, and you get the picture. It just goes over and over and over. Now, the great news is that these beliefs can be changed. So let's talk about how do we change those limiting beliefs. The first thing is we've got to become aware of them. And a lot of times this doesn't happen by ourselves. We'll see that there's things that are happening in our lives, right? Like these results that we talked about. And we start trying to figure out how do we get different results in our life. So we're out trying to really focus in on different results, not realizing that those results came from those actions, and then those actions came from a core belief. So we have to begin to thread it backwards to understand that the core beliefs are driving the actions and the results, and not spend all of our energy on just trying to get different results by trying to take different actions, because your actions are going to continue to be aligned with your core belief. So we have to start working on core beliefs, which starts at the beginning of this cycle with experiences. And often we need people to help us try to understand what some of our core limiting beliefs are, because we can't always see them. They're operating in the background. And that's one of the great things about working with a coach, is that you go through that discovery process. You begin to see where those limiting beliefs are showing up in your life, not by being told where they are, but helping you, partnering with you to help you become the source of your own healing, for you to begin to see what limiting beliefs that you have, how they got formed, and how to begin to heal them. So that's the first thing. We need to become aware that we have this limiting belief, and that's what's driving these results in our life. Now, the second thing that's really important in developing new core beliefs is that we need to shift our energy around how we're approaching those limiting beliefs. If you're aware of your limiting beliefs, or when you become aware of them, the immediate response usually is, how do I get rid of this? I hate this. I wish this wasn't in my life. It's ruining everything. And you really try to force it away. You get into fighting that limiting belief. We don't want to do that. And we'll talk about why in just a little bit. But what we want to do is we want to stop shaming ourselves for having that limiting belief, because that shame, it's reinforcing the fact that there's something wrong with you in your mind, right? Because you're adding shame onto shame. You're beating yourself up for feeling like there's something wrong with you, which is then making you feel like even more so that there's something wrong with you. So we don't want to come at it through shame. And we also don't want to come at it through an aggressive energy of just trying to push it aside and get rid of it. Because once again, when you're in that state, you're fighting against yourself, and you're sending the message to your system that there's something that you don't like about yourself, and you want to get that out of you, and that you wish that there was a part of you that wasn't around, okay? And what that's going to do is it's just going to keep it there. So the energy of just pushing against it, what you're going to find is that energy is going to push back against you, and it's going to keep showing up because it believes that it's there to serve you, to help you. And that leads us to the next point about how do we change limiting beliefs? We understand that they're developed in order to try to keep us safe, to try to serve us. And you might be thinking, how in the heck could feeling like an imposter try to keep me safe? What is that about? Why would that even make sense? Well, it makes a lot of sense when you think about you had an experience at some point, okay? And then from that you gave it some meaning, and that meaning that you assigned in that moment was to keep you safe. And from that meaning, you made some decisions. Those decisions became beliefs. But in that moment of making meaning, you were trying to figure out how to stay safe. And that limiting belief came forward as a way to keep you safe. And it's still operating in the background because it believes that you need it. You need that limiting belief in order to keep you from being hurt, to keep you out of harm. Now, I know that it doesn't seem to make sense in the beginning, but as you begin to really work with it, you'll see that the imposter syndrome, self-sabotaging, feeling like there's something wrong with you, was developed to help you stay safe, to help you survive. So let's just take the limiting belief of there's something wrong with me. If you lived in a traumatic home and you had a caregiver who was abusive or absent and wasn't a healthy caregiver, for you to assign the meaning in that moment that there's something wrong with the parent is a very risky and dangerous decision for a young person to make because your well-being is in their hands. So another decision or option that was available to you was to say, well, there's something wrong with me. I must be bad in order for somebody to be treating me this way. The person who's supposed to love me and take care of me is treating me this way, so I must be bad. Because if I'm bad, now I can figure out how to fix me. And then that limiting belief gets wired in there because you can't control their behavior, right? And I know we're not making that decision real consciously at 2, 1, 3 years old, whatever the age, but that's what's happening in many senses is your brain is trying to make the best meaning out of this situation in order to stay safe. And it's not a safe decision to think that the parent is incapable. It's a better decision to believe that there's something wrong with you, which then can give you some agency and control to try to correct the behavior, to say if I don't do this and I stay out of the way, then I'll be safe, okay? So it gets into a place of you really examining yourself and looking at yourself in judgment because that limiting belief could serve you better than the other belief. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope you're beginning to see how a limiting belief isn't something negative. It's not something bad. I know it might be producing negative results in your life or results that you don't want, but it is there to keep you safe. It's there to serve you. And so if you can shift your energy to seeing it that way, then that part of you will begin to open up to you instead of resisting you, okay? Because there's two things that's happening with that limiting belief. One, like I said, it's trying to keep you safe. And two, when you're beginning to resist it, okay, it's saying, listen, I'm trying to keep you safe. You don't understand that you need me. And then what's also happening is your system doesn't have another belief to go to. It doesn't have another option. Let me just talk through that just for a second. So if that limiting belief believes that it's there to serve you and keep you safe, and you've not yet developed another belief that gives you as much safety, as much security, as that limiting belief is giving you, okay? To say, well, if there's something wrong with me, then I need to figure out how to change myself so I'll stay safe. If your system doesn't have another alternative belief to go to, it's not going to let go of that other belief. And that's why limiting beliefs are so sticky, because we're trying to push away one when we don't have something else to replace it with or to hold on to. We have to develop new positive core beliefs that our system can begin to trust and go to, and that limiting belief will begin to fall away in the background because it's no longer needed to serve you. So instead of spending all of our energy trying to push against a limiting belief and just shame ourselves, and I wish that wasn't a part of my life, we've got to begin to spend our energy on focusing on how do we develop a replacement. And we do that by becoming very curious. We shift our energy to curiosity instead of aggressiveness and shame. So let's talk about curiosity. What would it look like for you to get really curious about how that limiting belief was formed instead of shaming it, instead of just trying to get rid of it? Really get curious about it, because when you get curious, it shifts all the energy and you'll begin to open up to yourself. You're not going to be as at war with yourself. You'll be inviting yourself into a discovery process with yourself, and that's a whole different energy than fighting yourself. So what would it look like to become curious? How did it get developed? How is it serving me? And then moving into what's a better core belief that I could have in this area? What's a more healthy, life-giving core belief that I want to carry about myself, about life, or about others? So let's walk through what that might look like. So if you experienced a very toxic relationship and you made the meaning that there's something wrong with me as a result of that relationship, you could take some time and really become curious about why would that meaning that I assigned to it and the decisions that I made and the core belief that I developed, why would that serve me? How could that keep me safe? And you could do some journaling around that and come to some aha moments. And then from there, you could say, well, what would be a more healthy meaning that I'd want to assign to that? Maybe I could assign the meaning that that person just didn't know how to have healthy relationships, or there was something toxic about the relationship, that two people came together who were both toxic and got into a toxic bond, and that played out as it naturally would. Or maybe you could assign the meaning that that was just not the right person for me, instead of I'm a bad person. Okay? And so that's that process of really sitting with yourself and beginning to understand what is the meaning that would be more healthy and more life-giving that you could assign to that experience, which would then help you go through the process of rewiring that belief system. And we're going to talk about how that happens in just a second. Okay, so I'm just going to review really quick before we move on. Okay, we've taken the time to identify how the whole limiting belief stuff gets wired into us, and we've looked at how do we change our energy, and we've played out some examples of how that might actually happen. Now we really need to dig into this question of what new core belief do you want to have about yourself? What core belief do you want operating in the background that was going to actually gravitate you towards and cause you to manifest that in your life? So an exercise that can help with that is to try to see yourself 2 years out, 3 years out from now. Who do you want to be? And what would that person need to believe about themselves in order to be there? So if a person wants healthy relationships, they're going to need to have the core belief that they deserve happy relationships. They deserve loving relationships. They're going to have to get rid of the limiting belief that self-abandonment is necessary in order to be in a relationship. So begin to visualize the outcome that you want to see happen. And then begin to understand the core beliefs that that person would have to have in order for that to manifest in their life, to make the decisions. We're back to decisions. We're back to choices, right? That would have to take certain actions to have those results. What would they have to believe about themselves? And then from there, we can get back into the whole cycle of how beliefs get installed in us, which is we start with experiences. So now as we talk about the experience part of it, let's shift gears and give another example. Let's say that there's a person who is just really abusive towards themselves. They're very toxic towards themselves. Their relationship with themselves really broken, huge inner critic, lots of shame. So that person is going to manifest a ton of things in their life that they don't want. So if they could then look into the future and say, I want to be the type of person that fully loves and accepts themselves. And from that place of love and self-acceptance, I'm achieving the things that I want. I'm valuing myself, so I'm in relationships where people value me. That's the type of person I want to be. Well, what type of experiences does that person need to have to change the core belief that they deserve or need to be beat up by themselves? They need to be criticized by themselves. What type of experiences does that future version have? Well, that person is probably experiencing kind words from themselves. They're probably experiencing self-care. They're probably experiencing healthy choices and boundaries, okay? And if you need help on boundaries, I just did a boundaries episode that you can go listen to. But they are experiencing things that are prioritizing themselves because that person loves themselves and they're giving themselves the experiences of self-love. So for you, if that's the goal of where you want to be, you need to start giving yourself new experiences or the experience of self-love. So you need to move from beating yourself up, criticizing yourself, and that being your constant experience, to an experience of practicing self-love and everything that begins to go with that. And when you begin to practice self-love, you're giving your brain and your body and your system the opportunity to assign meaning around that. And the meaning that you can begin to assign is that, wow, because I'm showing myself love, I must be worthy of love. And then you can begin to look at it and go, well, maybe the things that I felt about myself that I don't deserve love aren't true. Because as you begin to practice self-love and you're giving yourself an experience, your brain has to begin to try to figure out how to make meaning of it. And sometimes in the beginning, your brain's meaning that it assigns to it is, okay, this is new, feels a little different, but okay, let's go with it. But eventually, if it happens enough, your brain will give it the meaning that we believe that we're worthy of love because we keep showing ourselves love. And then you really begin to feel something shift inside of you, which can then begin to move you towards making a decision about yourself that there's not something wrong with you because you're showing yourself that there's not something wrong with you, which can then begin to change the way that you think about yourself and the emotions that you feel towards yourself, which can then drive a whole different set of beliefs that you carry about yourself, which are then going to drive new actions. You're not going to tolerate certain things anymore, and then you're going to get different results, and those results become new experiences, and the cycle gets wired in a whole different direction, one that's going to serve you in a much more beautiful way. So in a nutshell, that is how you're going to install new beliefs. That's how you're going to overcome those limiting beliefs, okay? Now, as you're practicing this and you're getting used to this, you might fail. You might slide back into old behaviors, and that's okay. And what you can do in that moment, instead of assigning the meaning that you'll never change, and that you're always going to continue to mess up and go back to old behaviors and you tried to change before and it never worked. You see, all of that is meaning making around the fact that you were trying to make some changes and you messed up. And so the meaning is that you'll never be able to change. Instead of that, you could take the time to practice inserting a new belief that you want to have, which is, this just simply means that I'm new at this. And I'm going to have to get used to it. And it's something I haven't practiced. And that's okay. The more I practice it, the better I will get at it. You see, the power of the meaning that we assign to what happens in our life is everything, because it's interpreting what's happening. And from that, it's unfolding an entire narrative in our lives. Now, if you'd like some resources about how to have a better relationship with yourself, you can see the show notes in this episode. You'll find a free assessment and 30-day guide to a healthier relationship with yourself. You also can learn more about the coaching services that I offer. You'll also find a link to pick up a copy of my book, Returning, a collection of meditations and reflections on self-love and healing. And you'll also be able to find information about the partners of the Permission to Love podcast, such as the Reframe app. And I want to encourage you that if you're trying to get sober, change your relationship with alcohol, the Reframe app, a fantastic tool to help you. It can help you track your sobriety. It can help bring knowledge and awareness to your habits around drinking, as well as some of the belief systems that you carry about how alcohol is serving you. It also allows you to track how much money you're saving, how many calories, and the time that you're saving by not engaging with alcohol. And the app also has community built into it with others who are on this journey of changing their relationship with alcohol. And if you use the link in this episode, you'll actually get 2 weeks free of the Reframe app. So take a moment and see the show notes in this episode. There's a lot of resources there to help you on your journey. Well, thank you again, as always, for being a part of the Permission to Love podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, I want to encourage you to take a moment to subscribe and to follow if you haven't done so yet, because that's going to keep you updated on when new episodes come out. And then if you haven't had a chance yet to share it with somebody else, I want to invite you to do that, because if it's having an impact in your life, it'll also have an impact in their life. And as I close out, I want to remind you, as always, that you are worthy of your own love.